5 seconds to go. Start. Reliance in support of the contention was placed by the learned counsel for the respondent on the decisions of this court in the case of Anita Supra, SMS Pharmaceuticals Limited Supra, and Himanshu versus B. Shivamurthy and another. Two main issues which falls for our consideration in this appeal are whether a director of a company would be liable for a prosecution under section 138 of Negotiable Instruments Act without the company being arraigned as an accused, whether a complaint under section 138 of Negotiable Instruments Act would be liable to be proceeded against the director of the company without there being any averments in the complaint that the director arraigned as an accused was in charge of and responsible for the conduct and business of the company. Before delving into the merits of the contention raised, it is important to analyze the cardinal provision which establishes the criminal liability upon the defaulter for dishonor of check, that is section 138 of NI Act. Section 138 of the NI Act reads as under: where any check drawn by a person on an account maintained by him with a banker for payment of any amount of money to another person from out of that account for the discharge in whole or in part of any debt or other liability is returned by the bank unpaid, either because of the amount of money standing to the credit of that account is insufficient to honor the check, or that it exceeds the amount arranged to be paid from that account by an agreement made with that bank, such person shall be deemed to have committed an offence and shall, without prejudice to any other provisions of this Act, be punished with imprisonment for a term which may be extended to 2 years, or with fine which may extend to twice the amount of the check, or with both, provided that nothing contained in this section shall apply unless the check has been presented to the bank within a period of 6 months from the date on which it is drawn, or within the period of its validity, whichever is earlier. The payee or the holder in due course of the check, as the case may be, makes a demand for the payment of the said amount of money by giving a notice in writing to the drawer of the check within 30 days of the receipt of information by him from the bank regarding the return of the check as unpaid, and the drawer of such check fails to make the payment of the said amount of money to the payee, or, as the case may be, to the holder in due course of the check within 15 days of the receipt of the said notice. For the purposes of this section, debt or other liability means a legally enforceable debt or other liability. Section 141 of NI Act deals with offences by companies while extending the liability to every individual who, when the offence was committed, was responsible for the conduct of the business, which also extends towards key managerial positions like that of the director. Section 141 of the NI Act reads as under: if the person committing an offence under section 138 is a company, every person who, at the time the offence was committed, was in charge of and was responsible to the company for the conduct of the business of the company, as well as the company, shall be deemed to be guilty of the offence and shall be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly, provided that nothing contained in this subsection shall render any person liable to punishment if he proves that the offence was committed without his knowledge, or that he had exercised all due diligence to prevent the commission of such offence. Provided further that where a person is nominated as a director of a company by virtue of his holding any office or employment in the central government or state government, or a financial corporation owned or controlled by the central government or the state government, as the case may be, he shall not be liable for prosecution under this chapter. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, where any offence under this act has been committed by a company and it is proved that the offence has been committed with the consent or connivance of or is attributable to any neglect on the part of any director, manager, secretary, or other officer of the company. Such director, manager, secretary, or other officer shall also be deemed to be guilty of that offence and shall be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly. A bare perusal of Section 138 and Section 141 of NI Act indicates that Section 138 of the NI Act casts criminal liability punishable with imprisonment for a term that may be extended to 2 years or with a fine that may extend to twice the amount of the check or with both on a person who issues a check towards discharge of a debt or liability in whole or in part and the check is dishonored by the bank on presentation. While Section 141 extends such criminal liability in case of a company to every person who at the time the offence was committed was in charge of and was responsible for the conduct of the business of the company. Stop.